Hey, good morning. How you doing, fans? Hey, listen, Coach O'Brien here. Hey, we got a great lecture today. Today's lecture has to deal with one of the most amazing, absolutely amazing missions of World War II. The Jimmy Doolittle raid of April 18th, 1942, Operation Shangri-La. Shangri-La was a mystical place in Tibet, and it was the subject of a movie and a book. And later, when everybody wanted to know how the heck did American bombers fly off an aircraft carrier and hit Japan, just 4 months after Pearl Harbor, FDR told the media it was a secret base called Shangri-La. Well, the Shangri-La was no secret base in Asia. Shangri-La was the USS Hornet. All right? Jimmy Doolittle is one of the most interesting people you could ever meet. He was born in Alaska during the gold rush days. He was not a big kid, and he got into a lot of scraps growing up, and so he became a kind of a prize fighter. He got into aviation, invented instrument flying, and was considered to be one of the greatest flyers ever. Now, after World War II, right, he went on to become famous in his own business enterprises, but everybody remembers him for being a daredevil pilot and the man who carried out the first strike against the Japanese. Now, the whole idea was that Roosevelt wanted to get America off its back. We really got hurt by Pearl Harbor. And so he came up with this crazy idea, him some guys in the Navy. Let's do what the British did. Let's scare our enemies to death. The Japanese had always told their people that Japan could never be bombed by the Allies because it's too far away. Well, what a shock would be if out of nowhere American bombers showed up over their cities, and like the Japanese, like the Germans, they didn't have a whole lot of bomb shelters. So we're going to bring terror to them and also to lift the morale of the American people. Now, gentlemen, an aircraft carrier is a very specialized thing. And that particular bomber you're looking at is a B-25 Mitchell, named after the great Army Air Corps general who talked about strategic bombing. It's a medium-range bomber. It's not a heavy. It's a tactical bomber. And they're not designed to fly off of aircraft carriers. They have a great fuel capacity. They can do like fly from Miami all the way up to like Virginia, that got that kind of distance, over 1,000 miles. But they're not meant to come off of aircraft carriers. So the idea of taking bombers off an aircraft carrier, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. Now, okay, there we go. Wrong way, guys. So, men, the idea was that we're going to build a secret base. It's not really that secret. It's up in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. And this particular section of the airfield will be top secret, while all these volunteers, not knowing where they're going to be fighting or where or how they're going to do it, are going to practice on a mock-up. And that mock-up is simply taking pieces of yellow paint and tape and marking off a fake deck of the USS Hornet. Gentlemen, if you're in the very front of the aircraft carrier, and there's 16, 15 bombers behind you, you're going to have less room than anybody else. Now, gentlemen, top secret, the volunteers were never told where they were going until the very end. Some of them kind of figured it out, but they had great respect for Colonel James Doolittle, because Jimmy Doolittle had flown some of the fastest racing airplanes in the golden age of racing in the 1930s. There's a picture of him with the Granville Brothers aircraft, one of the few first airplanes to ever fly over 300 miles an hour and win the Bindex Air Trophy in Cleveland. Now, there it is. Now, I stole that picture from the Pacific, but Fort Walton Beach kind of looks like that. It was kind of an abandoned, out of the way airfield, very small. Today, it's one of the largest airfields in the world. Well, after 30 solid days of practicing sun up to sundown, the crew flew to San Francisco, and their airplanes were lowered above the USS Hornet. Now, the problem is this, guys. We got to get these airplanes close to the Japanese harbor and to the mainland. And to do that, we got to make sure we stay out of fighter range of the fighter planes. The Japanese have good fighter planes at that time, so we got to be just out of range of them. Not only to protect the bombers, but we have two aircraft carriers there, the Wasp and the Hornet. And we cannot afford to lose these two carriers. Now, gentlemen, the problem is that 800 miles across the Pacific to bomb oil and navy installations in several cities, Tokyo, Kobe, Yokohama, Nagoya, and I can never say this properly, Yokosuka, right? Now, gentlemen, this raid is going to be a mosquito bite. Physically speaking, we're not going to do that much damage to the Japanese war industry, but it's going to be a horrible, horrible wake-up because the Japanese people were promised that they could never be touched by American or British bombers. And here it is 4 months later, and we make the Japanese high command into liars. Now, gentlemen, the mission was going pretty well. We had not been spotted, no Japanese fishing boats, nothing at all. But the problem was this. It's a one-way trip. If you come off the carrier and you don't crash into the sea because you don't have enough speed, because remember, on an aircraft carrier, you always got to fly into the wind, and somehow you're able to get off the deck of the Hornet, right? And you fly, you're going to be flying very low, under Japanese radar, and without you're not going to have a very good instrumentation, right? You're going to be doing some dead reckoning. And even if you make it to your target, then you have to land on an antiquated homemade Chinese landing base. Men, these bases are made by the peasants. They're nothing but trampled dirt and crushed rock. It's not like a regular modern Air Force base, right? So they're thinking, okay, this is going to be pretty challenging alone, trying to navigate 50 feet above the water, flying all the way to 800 miles to Japan, right, and doing the attack, and then landing on an antiquated Chinese runway. Doesn't even have radar to bring us in or radio communications. But then something happened. There was a Japanese military ship out there. They send out reconnaissance ships all the time, and we saw it. Now, did they see us? Did they broadcast a message back to the homeland? The Enterprise opened up and sunk this Japanese ship, but now, had we been spotted? So, Doolittle makes the most daring decision ever. He says, we're going to go right now. That's going to add another 150 miles on the 650 miles on the airplane. Now remember, men, if you have a crosswind, it takes away your mileage. If you have a headwind, it takes away from your mileage. Even the temperature of the atmosphere affects your fuel consumption. If you have a missing spark plug, right, there's a lot of elements. It's not an exact science. So instead of flying in darkness and attacking Japan early in the morning, the Americans are going to have to fly in broad daylight and pray that the Japanese fighters and anti-aircraft don't pick them up. And then, if you run out of fuel, you're going to have to crash land, hopefully near the base, and then find your way to your Chinese friends. This is mission impossible. Now, men, they pulled it off. All 16 planes got off the deck. Doolittle flew right over the Emperor's palace. I mean, right over it. Why they didn't drop bombs to kill the Emperor, I still don't know the answer to that. He was going to try to blow up an armory, but he accidentally hit and destroyed completely the biggest hospital in the city. One bomber realized they had not had enough fuel, deviated and landed in the Soviet Union where they crash landed. The Soviets are our friends. So what do? They held these guys as prisoners for months before they released them. Wow, that's some real good friends. Thanks, Russia. Now, men, the other aircraft that crash landed in China, okay, they had Japanese armies searching for them day and night. Anybody, any village who was suspected in helping these Americans hide were murdered and tortured, and their villages were burnt to the ground. You know, men, they don't talk about this much, but there may have been 250,000 farmers and peasants killed out of suspicion that they helped the American aviators. Gentlemen, we really hurt the Japanese pride, and it made the emperor look like a fool. Now, a couple of the American bombers actually crashed on the mainland. Some of these individuals were tortured and executed. Others who were not officers were kept in captivity, and they were tortured on a regular basis for the next 3 years. I can't imagine hitting Tokyo and Osaka and those other places I mentioned, and then dealing with the anger of the Japanese people, especially the military, when you made them look like a sucker. So it sent a message out there, men. It sent a message to the Japanese that you are not immune from attack. The shock to Japan was even higher than the shock of Germany when England bombed them in the first week of the war. From this moment on, the Japanese will always be wondering when the Americans will come back. It changes their entire tactics. They now have to start building homeland defense fighters and anti-aircraft and start building bomb shelters. They can't sleep at night anymore. And you know what? We are going to come back. But this time, we're not going to come back with 16 bombers. We're going to come back with hundreds of B-29 superfortresses dropping firebombs upon their cities. The Japanese didn't believe that any stories about bombers coming off aircraft carriers. They thought that these bombers had come off the island of Midway. And so now they are going to have to destroy the American island of Midway. And that's going to be one of our future lectures. When I was a kid, I read this book called 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. I think I was 8 years old, I don't remember, right? I couldn't put it down. They even made a movie about it. It was mostly propaganda. But I learned so much about geography of Asia because of this book. It was written by Ted Lawson. The guy crashed, had to have a very primitive amputation, and it's a story about how the Chinese risked their lives to smuggle him back to the safety of the United States. If you like this kind of stuff, this book is still available on Amazon. It's pretty cool. And there he is. He's a great American hero. Man, I tried to embed a YouTube video, and I'm sure I didn't do it right. But if you want to learn more about Jimmy Doolittle and the raid, go to YouTube and type it in. This was a heck of a man, and he was a proud American. And you know what? We got sucker punched in Hawaii, but we got off the mat, and we punched the Japanese right in the nose. Never underestimate the ability of the American people. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm looking forward to Easter and seeing you all guys real soon. This is OB signing off.